Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Hala, for that kind introduction. I come before you a little more dazed and confused than is usually the case because I traveled 19 or 20 hours yesterday from the other side of the world to come to Portland. So I'm 9 hours, my body is 9 hours ahead of the rest of you. So I'm really out of it. I'm sorry. I also have to give a speech tonight. So what I thought I would do today is to say a few words. I'll talk for, I hope, less than half an hour. Leave as much time as possible for questions. I find that questions are invariably the best part of any good talk. And then leave some time to sign some books because I have to get back and try and get myself ready to do this again to an even larger audience than this tonight. Which is actually the reason that I originally came to Portland to speak to the Unitarian Universalist Assembly, which is taking place here in Portland. But I'm thrilled to see so many people at a conference entitled 40 Years of Occupation, 60 Years of Dispossession. I think whoever organized this deserves a round of applause. This is an impressive gathering. It's especially impressive at a dispiriting and discouraging time like this. Palestine is in a deep crisis. Palestine has been in a deep crisis for 40 years. The title of this event indicates it. In fact, it's been in crisis for 60 years. The title of the event also indicates it. I think all of you know this. I'm not telling you anything that you don't know. If you know a little more about the history of Palestine, you know that, in fact, Palestine has been in crisis for most of the 20th century and right up till today. It's one of the things that the book that Hannah mentioned, The Iron Cage, tries to explain. Now, I could, if I had the time and the energy, I could lay out for you all the elements of the current crisis. But I think that really is something that's better done on paper than in a talk. There's some things that you really ought to read rather than listen to. And in fact, I think that some elements of the problems that we see today in Palestine are things that have not changed in their essentials. One of them is a concatenation of external forces, which have put the Palestinians in what I call in my book an iron cage. I originally meant that metaphor to describe the structure that the British shoved the Palestinians into during the Mandate, a system where they had to accept a situation in which essentially they didn't exist and another existed before the British would even talk to them. They said, you have to accept the terms of the Mandate. The Palestinian leaders would say, but the terms of the Mandate don't use the word Palestinian or Arab. It talks about the national rights of the Jewish people, the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. It has 6 articles talking about how the Mandate regime is supposed to do this. It doesn't talk about us. Our political rights, our national rights aren't even mentioned. The British would say, you have to accept the terms of the Mandate. And I describe that as an iron cage. The metaphor, in fact, is applicable to other externally imposed situations that the Palestinians have faced since the period of the British Mandate. I'm actually not going to talk about that today. I think that that's, again, something better read than listened to. I think, though, that there is something that I do want to talk about, which is also a central element in my book, but I will talk about it in terms of the present rather than historically. And this is a critical element which I think is hard to talk about, but and many people avoid talking about, and this is the internal element, some of the deep internal problems within the Palestinian national movement. As I try and show in my book, this is in fact an enduring element in Palestinian politics. The inadequacies, the failures, the internal conflicts of the Palestinian national movement in the 30s and the 40s were devastating. It's very easy to blame the British. It's very easy to blame the Arab governments. It's very easy to blame the League of Nations. It is possible to talk about American policy until the cows come home and blame the Bush administration or blame the United Nations or blame the Europeans or blame the Arabs or, of course, to blame Israel. And this is not to say that those are not all targets worthy of blame. But I think most people in this room know about that. So I am not going to talk about those things except in passing. I want to talk about some of the more complicated and harder to talk about issues which have to do with Palestinian internal politics. Now, Many people who follow Palestinian politics today, in the wake of this devastating fighting that's just taken place in Gaza, have been quick to place blame for the divisions within Palestine on external forces. They've focused, many of them, not I think incorrectly, on the entirely nefarious role played by leading figures in the Bush administration in encouraging, fomenting, and arming a Palestinian civil war. That's not wrong, in my view, to focus on that. Some people go so far as to talk about this or that Palestinian faction or group as traitors or as stooges and so forth. This, to me, is reminiscent of one of the most destructive and damaging aspects of Palestinian politics back in the 30s and the 40s, when takhween, calling other people traitors, was common on both sides of Palestinian politics. And it is, I think, probably a mistake. And I'm not going to do that today. In what I will be talking about this evening, in fact, at the Unitarian Universalist Assembly, I'm actually going to focus on the Bush administration. I'm going to focus on their Manichaean vision, on how that Manichaean black and white, good and evil, axis of evil as against whatever, how that has destroyed Iraq, taken Iraq from what was a unified country to possibly a country that may not remain unified, take a society that was still barely managing to function and shatter it, take the structures and institutions of that society and completely destroy them, leaving the country in a state that is almost indescribable. I will be talking about those things tonight. I'm not going to talk about them today. I will say, however, that that same Manichaean vision, that same obsessive, unfortunately, in some measure, religiously derived vision of good and evil has also driven this administration's policy in Palestine and in Lebanon, and has played a share in pushing both of those societies close to the abyss. I would be the last person to minimize the importance of the role played by our own government in all of these crises, whether Iraq or Lebanon or Palestine. But I think I'd be preaching to the converted, frankly, if I talked about that here today. I don't think there's a person in this room who probably voted for George W. Bush. Or if there is, they probably have repented and are hiding their heads in shame even as we speak. This is a man who has the lowest approval ratings of almost any president in modern American history. So it's very easy to pile on to the Bush administration. Many people now who mistakenly supported the war or supported this administration have seen the error of their ways and have seen the light. I'm not going to talk about that today. I think it's more important to focus on the internal problems of Palestine. If we're going to understand how this very grave situation came to pass, and if you can best understand how you can show solidarity with the Palestinian people. And what I'm going to do is not so much give you history as give you just a little background that I think is relevant to how we got to where we are today.